And that's what you're doing at iTech now, is working on mechanics.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a disconnect, or not disconnect, but a little bit of a journey to get to that point. So a disconnect for the audience to know, who is this guy David? He's working with iTech on the mechanical team, and how did he get to this point? But maybe before we get to that, maybe you could share a little bit about some of your mission experiences.
Yeah.
That before you ran into iTech.
Okay.
So what did that look like for you?
Sure. So when my wife and I got married and we moved to Clover, we joined a church there who we had been members of the entire time we've been there. And, missions was a thing that was always on the forefront of our minds. It was always promoted as being either, senders or goers or whatever, supporting missions. And so, our kids were small. So at that time, international missions just wasn't something that was really on our radar for a variety of reasons. So as a family, we would always make it a point with our church or other ways, do some type of mission projects or mission trips, we call them. And so we began doing that. The very first trip I ever went on was a trip to Wisconsin. And it was to do what most of those trips always ended up being, was construction things, 2x4, sheetrock, just construction things, which were important. It just wasn't what I was good at doing. I could do it, but I wasn't good at it. So, and that was a huge deal, just the leap of faith, just to get in a van and ride, 24 hours with a bunch of guys up. And that was a big deal. And so as we continued to do those kind of things, we would go on trips, with the kids and to different places in America. And, so I remember probably one of the things that kind of, we're talking about lead me here, was we were preparing to go on a trip to South Dakota. And we were going to pull a camper, and besides my wife and I, Kristen and Stephen and Donna and myself, we were going to take two friends of ours, Roger and his daughter Rachel. So there were 6 of us in the Suburban. We had a camper loaded up, and so we were, a day or two before we left. And so I had a good friend of mine that we always prayed together once a week. Every morning we would drive to the church and we would meet there and pray together. And this particular morning, I don't know how we got into conversation, but it was about Moses. And we just got into conversation about Moses and about how God used Moses for, in a mighty way, by allowing him to use the exact tool that he had in the staff that he had in his hand. His vocation, or, he was a shepherd, so he used a staff. And how God allowed him to use that same tool for all these mighty miracles that God performed, using the exact same thing that was in his hand. And that I don't know, we just talked about that morning. And that's never left me. So the night before we were leaving for South Dakota, it was a construction thing, and kids were going to do some backyard Bible schools. I couldn't get that off my mind. And so I go out and I have like 2 5-gallon buckets of construction tools, because that's just not what I do. And I put, 500-600 pounds of jacks and jack stands and sockets and wrenches and toolboxes and all this stuff in the camper. And I come back in the house and it's two 12-hour days driving. And my wife says, well, there's something wrong with the camper. I said, no, why? I saw you out there with jacks and stuff. I said, well, I'm not taking construction tools. I'm taking tools that I use. She said, well, that's not what this is. What are you going to do? I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but this is what I'm taking. So we made the journey up, and we got there, and there's this, we're in this big room, and so the I don't remember the guy's name, was over the entire event. So he was dividing everybody up into teams. So if you're going to go work at this construction site here, Backyard Bible Club's over here, and I was the last man standing, and I hadn't moved. And so I walked up to him, introduced myself, and he said, yeah, so what are you doing here this week? And I went, oh, I don't know yet. And he kind of looked at me perplexed, and I said, do you have anything mechanical or transportation related that's broken that needs to be repaired? And he said, man, yes, we do. We have a bus out here that's been broken for 2 years. We can't find anybody to fix it. And I said, well, I'm your guy. So some other work we did that week, some of the motor homes had some issues driving up there, so we got those repaired. But we were able, a friend of mine, Charlie, and I were able to get this bus fixed and get brakes on it. And I never really thought anything about it. We got it finished, and we kind of took a victory lap around all the construction sites. It was the very last day because, parts and those kind of things. So when we got it done, so the plan was to go the first week and do this work at this reservation, and then the second week we were going to drive further west and have a family vacation out at the Badlands, Mount Rushmore. Well, that night, the night before the morning we were supposed to leave, this whole series of tornadoes came through. And you remember that, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. It's fun being in a camper in a tornado.
So, and there were hailstones as large as you guys' coffee cups, and I've never seen anything like it. In fact, it totaled our camper, our vehicle, everything was total lost that night. Yeah. And so, and not only our stuff, everybody's stuff. All the lenses in the cars, windows knocked out. We didn't have a window in our camper. And so we got everything patched up the best we could, and we drove home. And it was a long way home because our kids didn't get to do the fun part. About a week later, I got a phone call. And it was the guy that was over the whole mission thing. And he called to say, David, I just want to let you know something. I said, what's that? He said, and these were his words. He said, I didn't tell you this part. So at that time, there was this big powwow going on, right? And it was just thousands and thousands of people. And he said that because the fact they had that bus, they rescued hundreds of people out of a valley that flooded that night because they were all in tents and they had no way out. He said, we rescued hundreds of people out of that valley that night because we had that bus and were able to drive it. And I thought, man, that's pretty cool that God could use me in a way for something that I do, like Moses. In a way, the tools I use for His glory and for and that was a real eye-opening thing for me. And so, so that's kind of was a couple of events, the whole story of Moses, and then that event sort of changed the way I started seeing myself and being used in missions, I guess you might say. Yeah.